In this edition of 2020 Daily Trail Markers, we're just 7 days out from the Iowa caucuses, and the latest CBS News Battleground Tracker poll shows Senator Bernie Sanders picking up steam in a very tight race. The Vermont senator took the lead with 26% of support from likely Iowa Democratic caucus goers. Former Vice President Joe Biden was right behind him at 25%. He's followed by former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg at 22%. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren is at 15% in our latest survey, and Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar rounded out the top 5 with 7% support. The rest of the Democratic field came in with 1% or less. Joining me now from Iowa are CBS News 2020 campaign reporters Adam Brewster and Musadiq Bidar. Adam's at a mock caucus event at Drake University in Des Moines, and Musadiq is also there outside in the cold in Des Moines. Adam, first, tell us, what is a mock caucus? What are you seeing there?
So this is an example of what people will be doing a week from tonight, right about this time. They are explaining the rules to students so that they understand how the movements work in a room. For those who aren't familiar with a caucus, you don't cast a vote on a ballot. You actually, the Democrats in Iowa, go to areas of a room to show that they support a candidate. They'll be electing delegates, not a popular vote total per se. And there's a couple little wrinkles in that. In order to win delegates from that room, you have to hit what's known as the viability threshold. In most rooms, you need to hit 15%. So in a room of 100 people, you need at least 15 supporters standing with you. There will be one round of alignment. After that, they'll look at anyone who's hit that 15% mark. Those people will be locked in. Anyone else in that 100-person room, if you have 14 or less, you have a couple of options. You can go to one of those groups that has 15 or more. You can try to grow your group to try to hit that 15% threshold. That's where the second choice comes in for so many people. Your first choice might not be the person who you're able to end up supporting. So they're going through these rules and explaining it to students, many of whom will be caucusing for the first time a week from tonight.
It's like a giant game of adult Red Rover. Musadiq, we just saw those Battleground Tracker poll results, just 3 points separating Sanders and Biden, but there's a much bigger separation when it comes to enthusiasm, right?
Well, as you said, Senator Sanders and Vice President Biden are neck and neck in that poll, followed by Mayor Pete Buttigieg. But this race has been close for months. At one point, we had over 24 candidates, and outside of Sanders, Warren, Buttigieg, and Biden, no one has really been able to crack into that top 4. However, if we break it down a little more, there is some evidence that shows in our poll that Senator Sanders, his supporters are a little more stickier. Nearly 50% of his supporters said they are committed to him. That compares to only about 27% for Vice President Biden. Now let's take a look and dig in a little bit more. It gets even more interesting because 68% of Democrats in Iowa, an overwhelming majority, say Senator Sanders is the candidate who will fight for people like them. That compares to only about 40% for Vice President Biden. More voters also say that Senator Sanders is the candidate who's better equipped to handle attacks from President Trump compared to Vice President Biden. This is going to be important because a lot of voters tell me they want a politician who will fight for them and also be able to handle attacks from President Trump. So as we move into these next final few days, we're going to have to see how that plays out. And Senator Sanders also has a bigger ground game here in Iowa. It's going to make a difference when he's busy and tied up in Washington, D.C. with the impeachment trial.
And let's go back over to you, Adam. I'm an Iowan. I remember the first time that I caucused, and we were just talking with Moose about how second chances matter so much. According to our latest poll, who really stands to benefit from this caucus system?
Well, it's hard to like from our last poll, Vice President Biden made a big leap. When you look at some of those second choices and where they go, it really depends on who those supporters are. Someone like Senator Warren, who in the fall, was polling better than she is now. Our poll the other day had her at that 15% threshold, indicating there might be precincts where she is and is not viable. Some of those supporters could go to someone like Senator Sanders. Senator Amy Klobuchar may not hit viability in too many precincts, so you could see some of her supporters go to former Vice President Joe Biden. Some of those alignments will be tough to tell because it will be based on what happens within those rooms. But Vice President Biden led with the top second choice support.
And one Democratic candidate has decided to skip Iowa altogether. Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg is instead putting his focus on the Super Tuesday states. Moose, how's that strategy really working out for him?
Well, he's starting to climb up in some of the polls nationally, especially in the Super Tuesday states. He was in fourth place in our poll, and he is focusing on these states that have more delegates. He has chosen to purposely skip Iowa. Earlier in the year, he penned an op-ed saying that calling out Iowa for its lack of diversity. He said he would rather go to other states where there are African American voters, Latino voters, and Asian American voters. Iowa is more than 90% white. And when confronted with that fact, a lot of Democrats in this state like to defend themselves by saying they helped elect the only African American president in the history of this country. But at the end of the day, the thing to keep in mind is the delegate count, because you win delegates, you win the nomination. And the first four early states only account for about 150 delegates. The Super Tuesday states have 10 times as many as that. And Mayor Bloomberg has already spent more than $250 million of his own money. He doesn't need to count on that momentum that winning Iowa provides for you, because he has his own money to spend on advertisements. And at this point, all we can do is wait and see if that approach works for him.
Hey, Moose, I want to follow up with you on that. Since you're there on the ground, how are Iowa voters actually responding to Bloomberg saying that he's skipping Iowa, but he's gaining in popularity elsewhere across the country? Are you seeing people there in Iowa caring about Bloomberg, or is it really focused on the folks who are bootstrapping their way through the Hawkeye state?
They're really focused on the candidates who are able to make it here. One thing Iowans take a lot of pride on is their ability to vet these candidates, to narrow down the field. Initially, when Mayor Bloomberg said that he wasn't going to come to Iowa, it irked some Democrats in the state. At the time, the party chairman, Troy Price, said he was disappointed in that decision, because he said he wished that Iowans would get a chance to ask him those tough questions. And in some rooms, they do ask those tough questions, questions that oftentimes we want to ask the candidates. And they are not having a chance to vet Mayor Michael Bloomberg in that same way. But at the same time, they have a large field of candidates at this point to narrow down and choose from, and that's what they're focused on.
And Adam, you're also right there on the ground in Iowa. Another question for you about those senators who are now absent. Are voters feeling that absence? Is it affecting how they feel about who they're going to cast their support for? And one other question, what's the reaction to the continued mentions of former Vice President Joe Biden by President Trump's legal team as this impeachment trial continues? Is there any effect on Iowa Democrats?
Well, Vice President Biden today kind of just said, "Are you kidding me?" when he was asked about that. His campaign put out a statement that said, in part, "Here on planet Earth, the conspiracy theory that Bondi, the woman who, the lawyer for the Trump administration, who was speaking today, repeated, has been conclusively refuted." So, they responded saying this is a theory that's been debunked about Hunter Biden. There have been some questions that Vice President Biden has gotten about his son Hunter's role in Ukraine. But when you get back to those senators, our poll showed about 2/3 of Iowa Democrats said there wouldn't really have much of an impact on the race. About a fifth, 22%, said it would hurt the potential candidates, and about 10% said it might help those candidates. I heard a couple competing schools of thought this weekend when I was out with Senator Klobuchar. One man told me, these candidates have been here for months. We've had so many chances to see them. Most people who have wanted to see them have taken that opportunity by now. And another woman who said, I'm still undecided. I'm trying to see as many as I can. And it may be difficult for her to see some of those senators who are having to spend time back in Washington. While they're in Washington, they're out here sending surrogates to the state. Senator Warren is sending Secretary Julian Castro to the state. Senator Sanders' wife, Jane Sanders, is coming to the state this week. Senator Amy Klobuchar is doing a tele-town hall and sending some of her state legislative endorsements out to campaign on her behalf.
Musadiq, Bidar, Adam Brewster, I know you're excited about the Iowa caucuses. I am too. Thank you so much for joining us.